This is a little bit of an abbreviated version of a lecture that I gave in Phoenix this year at National ASLA. And those of you that know me know that I love a great cliche. So I'm trying to condense this down to basically a top 10 list. Not so much focusing on projects and what we did, so much as why we do it, why my office in San Francisco, and I think SWA as a whole, is interested in being in international practitioners of landscape architecture. Kind of place in time, I'm sure everyone has received their LAM magazine and realized that there's a feature on China this month. Interesting to know, Kunjin Yu actually interned and actually worked in our Laguna Beach office before he returned to China. There's some connectivity there between our firm and Turnscape. But also interesting to note that the previous month, Claude Cormier, a French-Canadian working in Toronto, was featured in the cover of the magazine. And there were also significant articles on projects in Singapore. So the point here is that we are not thinking about becoming, we are in the middle of seeing global practice evolve in the world of landscape architecture. Statistically, last year, 560 entries into national ASLA. So if you submitted your award, your project, you had about a 6.5% chance of getting an award. Of the 37 awards that were given, 30 of those awards were overseas. They were international awards. And of those international awards, 5, so nearly half, were in China. And I'm not here specifically to talk about China, but China is part of the developing world, and it's amazing to see in my career, in my lifetime, the revolution that's happened there in landscape architecture, starting with the need to have it, and clients and government agencies realizing that this profession exists and kind of importing practitioners from the US. But then the Chinese academics and publishers and writers and the general public gaining an interest, and as this month's LAM points out, kind of the explosion of programs in schools in the country itself. For our firm, in 2008, before the Great Recession, we were about 35% international and 65% domestic. And that's actually a gauge that we have held for many, many years. We're comfortable going to 40% or even 50% of our work being international. But here we are 2012, and that formula has inverted. We are now 65% international and 35% domestic. It's worth pointing out that this is also fee-based. So this is based on fees international versus fees domestic. If you took a cross-section of projects, we're about half of our projects in San Francisco are domestic and half are international. But the international fees tend to be larger, more complex projects, and they generate higher fees. So, first off, number 10, a reason to go international is to have a diverse client base. In 2008, like most practitioners, we did see a dip, and a substantial dip, because that 65% of our work, some of it shut off completely. But the difference is that we were already working internationally, and we were able to mobilize very quickly. And by 2010, we were stable, pretty much where we were in 2008. So we had a very short period of a dip in our projections and our project work, which globalization actually helped us recover much, much quicker. Number 9, and really these are not necessarily kind of least to most important, but the diversity of recruitment internationally. Some of the top students in US universities are from overseas. And they're not from one particular country, from one particular place. They're, from Korea, from Europe, from Latin America. There's a huge surge in landscape architects. We're all competing for a very small, top-tier pool of landscape architects coming out of the university. When you're working internationally, I think it attracts students from other places. And these students who kind of come and work for you as entry-level landscape architects bring with them not just skills and experiences from other places, but the possibility to go to their place of origin and expand your own work. Typically, you know, they're connected, they know someone, or they work somewhere, and it's been having people come from different parts of the world has actually been a huge asset in us being able to go to those places and mobilize and do the work. Number 8 is kind of the uniqueness of San Francisco itself. This is a global city. We're tiny, we're 800,000 people, and we know, you know, that quite often we feel very provincial, but the name, the brand is very, very big. And we connect very well to other places around the world. And when someone like Renzo Piano comes to San Francisco to do a project, typically they're going to look for someone who has an international name. They're going to look for someone who can work at their pace with their, you know, with their studios and their work. And I think being an international practice helps us promote our own city as kind of a center for international design. A very interesting thing about the profession of landscape architecture itself is that it is globally translatable. A river acts the same in Asia or Europe or South America as it does here in the United States. And although there are many, many important cultural layers that we need to understand when we go to other places, the kind of the basics, the natural systems, urban design, those sorts of things are very, very directly translatable. And you know, it's interesting to me that these images of, you know, farm work, riparian villages, parklands, it could be in many, many different places in the world. It happens to be on a site, Nanhu in China, which is dealing with, you know, what we would consider extreme density. But in terms of landscape architecture, what we do is very useful. It's very applicable to the developing world, and it's very helpful in terms of helping them guide this kind of explosion of urbanization. Number 7 is just advocating globally for authenticity. I think that authenticity in ideas is the strength of landscape architecture. That's what we bring to the design world. Every site is unique, every place is unique, and it's something that is a problem not just overseas, but here in the United States. There's lots of confusion over the semantics of landscape architecture. So I'm kind of starting here with a US project in Phoenix, Desert Ridge, where the client, Marriott, came to the table with the idea of Pirates of the Caribbean. That's really the theme that they wanted in Scottsdale. And it was, you know, a hot place, so, you know, it seemed like it fit in very well with their thinking. And, you know, we had to work hard to convince them that they were in a different ecology, there was a different place, there was a different way of going about developing their project. And I think one of the challenges that we face with globalization is actually this. It's kind of this gentrification of landscape architecture. This is the place where most people get their information about landscape. This is the place where not just the general public, but most of your clients first touch landscape architecture. And you know, a couple years ago, I gave a lecture for the Landscape Institute in Great Britain, and one of the questions was, you know, what could I do to help England kind of break out of the picturesque landscape? What could we do to bring kind of contemporary design and thinking to England? And the reality is that the brand of British landscape architecture is so strong. The boxwood and the roses and the lawn, it's so pervasive that it's very difficult for them to kind of break out. But Great Britain was also a great exporting country in its heyday, and this is what they exported as landscape. And this kind of, you know, pastiche for landscape architecture really appears everywhere in the world. This could be in Monterrey, Mexico. This could be in China. You're going to see the same plant material and the same kind of approach to landscape architecture. And even here in, you know, California, in the High Sierra Desert, or Nevada, in Reno, where they have this beautiful, beautiful regional landscape, They have Earth Day in Idlewild Park in Reno, which is dominated by roses, lawn, and boxwood. There's kind of an identity of that type of landscape that even in our own country we struggle with. And I would attribute this to kind of globalization as well. One of the things that we have in this country, though, is incredible landscape infrastructure. We have an incredibly well-developed landscape contracting system, nursery system, irrigation supplies. All of this is, at our hand, and it's been developed over the last 100 years. And we have this incredible body of knowledge that quite often we kind of just take for granted when we do projects in the United States. But when you go overseas, I think that one of the great joys is that you're bringing your full body of knowledge. It's not just what you do that you're bringing, but how you do it. You need to teach clients how to work with indigenous plants, because quite often they're going to have to set up their own nursery. They're going to have to set up their own plant salvage program, and that's going to be a part of your charge as the landscape architect in charge.